Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about the filters on AncestryDNA. We're going to just spend some time going over how to use them, or at least how I use them. We did a presentation about these DNA filters last month when they were introduced. If you remember, Anna Swain joined me. If you haven't watched that presentation, I would encourage you to do so. Today we're going to do this a little bit differently, and it's going to be even a little different for those of you who join me regularly, a little bit different than how we usually do things. I'm actually just going to walk you through how I do something. It doesn't mean it's the right way or it's the only way, but it's what I've found that works for me in working with my DNA matches. One of the things that we've discovered is as more people take the DNA test, of course, you're getting more cousin matches. So there are a couple of things that I just want to reiterate if you haven't watched a presentation about DNA before, or if you're still not really clear on things. When we test your DNA, we compare your DNA sample against the 130,000 other people who've also taken the DNA test. And we can then tell you with a degree of certainty, here are the people that you are related to and the degree to which you are related, your first, second, third cousins, fourth cousins, distant cousins. That is just a DNA-only exercise. Then, once we've found those matches based on your DNA, if you both have trees online, we compare the trees so that we can see if we can find a common ancestor. If we do, we're going to provide you with a little leaf, and I'll show you where to find those. If we can't, then we check your tree for some other things. Are there common surnames? Are there common locations? We're going to show those to you as just a tool or a way for you to say, oh yeah, like they have these same people in my tree. Well, now with the new DNA filters that came out a little over a month ago, we've just kind of expanded your opportunities to work with those matches. Because what happens is, as new people take the test every week and that database just keeps growing, more cousins are being added to your list. So I just want to make sure that you understand and have some ideas, or at least some thoughts around how to work with these matches so that you can connect with cousins and grow your family tree. That's one of the reasons why we do this. So, long introduction for a not very long presentation, but hopefully that makes some sense to some of you. So let's just talk first about where to start when you're working with these DNA filters. The very first thing you need to do is just become, there's a typo already, become really familiar with how cousinship works. And we'll talk about that here in just a minute. Then you need to become very familiar with your own family tree, and we'll discuss some tools available and some ways you can do that. And then you're ready to use those filters to search for surnames and look for patterns. And then I would encourage you to connect with other users, contact other users, and work together to find those connections. So let's talk through each of those things. First, let's talk about how cousinship works. There are still a lot of people who just don't quite have this straight in their mind. And so a lot of times I'll use this chart to help you understand how the generations work. So you are generation 1, and you being either you or the person who took the DNA test. And there's only one of you, right? And so that's great. You have 2 parents in generation 2, and you have 4 grandparents in generation 3, and you have 8 great-grandparents in generation 4, and so on. So here are the numbers of the generations, up to 10. Here is the relationship to you. And then here are the number of people in that generation. So by the time you get back to your 7 times great-grandparents, you have 512 of them. That's a lot. And chances are you probably don't know very many of them. You probably haven't identified them yet. But here's how cousinship works, right? So you are related to yourself as self. You're a child of your parents, and their children are going to be your siblings. Your grandparents' other grandchildren are either going to be your siblings or your first cousins, and then you just work your way one generation at a time. If you have common grandparents, your first cousins. If you have common great-grandparents, your second cousins, third cousins, fourth cousins, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth cousins. So when we look at your DNA matches, we can tell pretty much 10 degrees here, or up to your seventh great grandparents. We can identify connections, which means that these people that have common seventh great grandparents with you are going to be eighth cousins. Hopefully that makes sense. That's how cousinship works. Now, if you like in my case, I know, wow, I don't even know how many of these people I know anymore. Very few of them though. Probably less than a third of these people I've identified. Which means if I have an eighth cousin match on DNA, I'm probably not going to be immediately able to tell who they are or how they're related to me, because I'm missing huge chunks of my tree. And you'll see that here in just a minute. So one of the things that I do and that I've done is created big charts so that I can see right off the bat where my holes are, but also so that I can see at a glance where I do know some information. So there are a couple of ways to do that. So here is a chart. This is a 9-generation chart, and it's for my grandfather. So my father took the DNA test, so he's generation 1. So his parents then are generation 2, and his grandparents are where we're going to start seeing those cousin matches. So if I look at this chart here, you probably can't make it out really clearly because it's super teeny on my screen. I'll show you in just a minute where to go to make this and how to make it a little bit larger for yourself. But this is just to give you kind of an overview. And maybe you can see this on your screen. I have giant blank chunks in my tree, right? Because I have only been able to trace some of these family lines back to the 3rd, 4th, 5th generation. So generations 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are empty. And that is important to understand about your own tree, just where it's at, the reality of where it's at. And so charts like this give you a really clear indication of where your holes are, so where you might need to focus some of your research, and where some of those lines go way back. Like I have some here. Like I said, you can't read what's on the screen. I can't even read it because it's so tiny in this view. But you can see that these things here are filled in. So here's where you're going to go to make a chart like this. When you're in Ancestry.com, if you have a tree online, you can use this publish feature. So I'm going to click this publish button, and it's going to take me to our My Canvas product, which is a way to just create books and posters and charts. I'm going to click here on Family Tree Poster. And if I scroll down just a little bit here on my screen, I want to create a standard poster. So I click that and I get this little dialog box that asks me how many generations. I want a 9-generation chart. That's the biggest I can go. Okay, you can do them for 8, 7, 6, 5. But what you want is you want to see as many people as possible. And remember, 10 generations or up to 8th cousins is what you're trying to get a view of for your DNA. And so you want to do a 9-generation chart. Let me find the right family tree here. And I want to do it for the parent of the person who took the DNA test, because that person is generation 1, and then this will be, let's see, I don't think I've done one for this grandmother yet. Then this person will be generation 2 all the way back to this 10th generation here. So it's going to take it just a moment. What it's doing is it's looking at my tree that I already have online at Ancestry.com, and it's creating this chart for me. And then it's going to, here we go. Okay, so here is the chart for my grandmother. And then I can print that out, or I can just preview it if I want. And when you preview it, you can actually use these zoom features to just zoom right in on it so that you can actually begin to read things. Again, as you can see, I have lots of holes in my family tree, things where the research has just come to a screeching halt, but I have some lines that go way back. And this is a really good view to be able to look at and just say, oh, okay, here's where I need to spend some time and work, or here are some places where I can start to search for some of these family names to see if there are other people who are doing this research that I can work with to discover this information. So this view of your family tree is going to be really useful to you. Again, that's a 9-generation family tree chart, and you want to start it with the parent of the person who took the DNA test. Now, I've got one of these for each of my 4 grandparents because I had my parents take the test. And so that's what we're going to work with then is the results of this. So let me just save here. There's one more thing I want to show you. Okay, let's come over here. Okay, here is my grandmother's tree. We're going to look at that in just a minute. The other thing that you might want to do if it helps you is label just right across the top of your family tree so that you understand the generations. So again, remember I started this with the parent of the person who took the DNA test. So that means that anybody who has this generation as a common ancestor is going to be a first cousin. Anybody who has a common ancestor in this generation is going to be a second cousin, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth. So I just labeled right across the top of my family tree what the generations were so that I can look down and say, oh, well, if this is our common ancestor, well, then we're fifth cousins. It's just an easy way to keep track so that you can start to understand how you're related to some of those DNA matches exactly. And then you might want to start to make notes of that. So now let's talk about the actual filters. So when I am in my AncestryDNA, so here are the results, my father's DNA results. You have, of course, the ethnicity summary at the top, which is interesting, but not the point of what we're doing today. And so I'm going to scroll down here to the filters. We have our standard filters, which are hints, new, and starred. So when hints are selected, it just means that anybody for whom you have a little leaf, that's who's going to show up in the list. So it just filters that list right down to people who have leaves. And that's great because it means we've done the DNA test, we know you match. We've also now checked your tree and we can tell where you have a common or a shared ancestor. So I can go through these, and hopefully you've done that. I can go through those one at a time and take a look at those. Today I want to talk more about the surname filters though. So if I undo this hints filter, I'm going to come over here to this search matches button. Click on that and you'll watch it just slides over my filters here at the top. And now I'm going to search by surname. So what I want to do is I'm going to want to focus on one family at a time. So pick a set of ancestors on your tree. It's really tempting to just kind of be all over the place. And when you're just trying something out or trying to figure out how it works, that's fine. But when you really want to get serious about making this work, pick a set of ancestors on your family tree and focus on them, stick with them. So for the purposes of our exercise today, I am going to come over here to this family tree, and you'll notice I'm going to use one of the lines that is really well documented. And I'm going to do that because this is going to give me a good place to start to learn how to use the filters, and also if it's a well documented line in history, like historically, chances are that a lot of other people have tied into it. So I'm going to use this couple way over here on this 9th generation on this chart. Let me just drag this over here so you can all see what I'm looking at. And their names are John Barry and Mary Dudley Kimbrough. So this is the couple that I want to focus on as common ancestors. I should have people who are related to me through this couple as either 8th cousins or less. So I'm going to come back over here to my filters, and I'm going to type in the name Barry. And what we're going to see is it searches through all of my matches, as it's going to filter down that list of matches to people who have the name Barry in their family tree. Now that's a pretty common name, and as you can see, if you look through this list of matches, you're going to see I think there's like 3 pages worth. If I come down here to the bottom, Don't get seasick. Okay, if I come down here to the bottom, yeah, there's 3 pages of matches of people who have this name in their family tree. So what I could then do is I could filter it even further by location. So if I go into my family tree and I pull up, let's go to Jesse Berry here. Actually, I think his name is John. There we go. If I go to John Berry was born in Christchurch, Middlesex, Virginia. So if I add a location of Middlesex, Virginia, and then search again, what it's now going to do is it's going to filter those lists of people who have berries in their tree, looking for people who also have Middlesex, Virginia in their tree. And now there's just 1. You'll notice this is in the 5th to 8th cousin range. There is no shaky leaf, which means there's no information here about finding a common ancestor, but this person does have a tree. And so I could then go review this match and see if I can see anything in her tree that looks like it matches. The first thing I'm going to want to do is look for that Berry surname. Okay. It did load. I was going to say we don't need to wait for it to load, but so here is the name Berry in our shared surname list, and then I can come here and I can start to look to see where her berries are from. It looks like the oldest one in her tree is a Thomas, born in 1727 in Virginia. My oldest ancestor is a Berry born in 1695 in Virginia. So this could be a son, it could be a nephew, or it could be no relation. But that gives me a place where I can start doing some research. I can look in my tree and I can say, do I have all of the children of John Berry identified? And in this case, I believe that I do. So Thomas is not listed as one of his children. Do I know who the father of John Berry is? Yes. Do I have all of his children listed? No, I don't. So here might be a place where I could spend some time. Find all of the children of Garrett and Elizabeth Berry. And is one of them named Thomas, or is one of their grandchildren named Thomas? So this has just given me a place to focus that research on that one family. Now, one of the other things that we need to do is not forget the women, okay? So John Berry is a common ancestor, but his wife is also a common ancestor. And since her surname is a little bit more unique, maybe that's the surname that I want to focus on here. So I can come in here, and her name is spelled Kimbrough, and I'm going to do a search on that. And now you can see there's a few more matches, but this is a manageable list. It's not pages and pages and pages. It's just one partial page. And in the spirit of looking for patterns, if you look at this list, one of the things that you might notice is that the person who was on the last list is not on this list. Again, that's just a reinforcement that that person has not traced their tree back far enough in order to connect with this common ancestor. Doesn't mean they're not related, doesn't mean they're not related through the Berry line. It just means that they don't have this surname in their tree anywhere. So start to look for some of those kinds of patterns. Now, the other thing that you might notice, if I scroll down this list here, I'm going to see, I think I saw one. Here we go. Here is a little lock. Now, those of you who have been doing this for a while know that this little lock right here on this tree means that this person's tree is private, which means if I were to go and click on Review Matches, I would not be able to see their tree. But it did come up in my list because Ancestry.com peeked at the tree and said they have this surname in their tree. So for those of you who are working with a lot of matches who have a lot of private trees, and everybody has their trees either public or private for their own reasons, you can at least start to see who has some of those common surnames in their tree. And now you can email this person. When I click on Review Match, one of the options I have here is to send a message to this user. I can send a message to this user, I probably would, and say, I have been doing some surname searches and I understand you have berries in your family tree. how, who is your oldest berry relative or ancestor, so that we can work together to figure out how we might be related. So again, I'm going to search on both this couple, both the husband's surname and the wife's surname, to start to get some information on some of those lists. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to search by the married surnames of their daughters. Again, that's going to, if you have the children in your tree and even the grandchildren in your tree of your ancestors, chances of you making a connection are going to be exponentially greater. That also works both ways, right? So you may have information in your tree that somebody else doesn't have in theirs, or you may come across other people who have information in their tree that you don't have in yours. So the more often that you can come down a generation or two at least in your tree, the more likely you are to make some of those connections. So I would encourage you to do that as well. Okay, like I said, today's presentation was super short, but it's just to give you an idea of how I work with some of those filters. So the first thing you're going to want to do, probably if you if you're a visual person and want something tangible, is go in and create one of these charts, 9 generation charts that you can print out. Start with the parent of the person who took the DNA test, and then print this out. If you can print it on legal size paper, that might make it a little bit easier for you to read. Even better if you can print it to a PDF and take it to a copy shop to get it printed on large paper. I have a large one just tacked on the wall in my office so that I can refer to it as I work through these couples, one family at a time, trying to determine where some of those connections are. The next thing I would do, if as I worked on this, after I've searched for Barry and Kimbrough, I would come down a generation and look for anybody who has the surname Bradley in their family tree. So now I've got this list of people who have Kimbroughs in their family tree. Now I want to see, do any of these same people also have Bradleys in their family tree? Maybe we're not 8th cousins, maybe we're 7th cousins as I come down a generation. And here we can see I've got a 4th cousin match with that particular surname. So you just have to kind of work it one generation at a time, look for some of those patterns, search for the names of both the couple, both the husband and the wife, and then also, if you know the married names of some of those daughters, search for those as well. And look, again, you're looking for patterns. You're looking for, in a single family, does the same DNA match show up when I search for all 3 or 4 of these surnames in this family? And if they do, then at least that gives you a place to send them a message and say, let's start focusing here so that we can figure out how we're related. Hopefully that's useful and helpful information. As always, if you're watching this live, I will be on our live stream chat in just a few minutes to answer any additional questions you may have. If you're watching an archived version of this on our YouTube channel, just leave a comment and I try to review those as often as possible and respond as necessary. This is Crista Cowan. Until next time, have fun climbing your family tree.